You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game, and we'll be doing lots of politics and public policy this evening because we have as our guest State Senator Bill Brady, Republican from Bloomington. He would like to be governor in 2010. That's coming up. We're taping this show on, it sounds odd, August 17th, the year 2008. We're talking to Bill Brady about his imminent run for governor in 2010. That's when you got to start these things. Well, I don't know. We'll see in a second whether he'll declare that, but everybody knows he's running. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the endless summer, the endless fight between Berkowitz and Speaker Mike Madigan, with Emil Jones, Senate President, thrown in for fun. And what do the Republicans have to say about that, if anything? Tom Cross, House Republican leader, Frank Watson, Senate Republican leader. So if you're interested in taxes, if you're interested in spending, maybe even if you're interested in gas prices, we might even work that into the show. Whatever. I mean, if you're interested in education and you think you got a good education or a bad education for your kids, you might want to know what to do about it, what Reverend Meeks is up to, the fight that's going on in the Democratic Party, the search for a message in the Republican Party. It's all here, so don't turn that dial. And whether you're watching this downstate, upstate, in the suburbs, in the city of Chicago, this show relates to you. Bill Brady, of course, is a senator from Bloomington, but he's much broader because, as I say, well, one, senators are much broader. Two, even if it weren't, those issues that they talk about in Bloomington are pretty similar to the ones they talk about upstate. And when you start running for governor, even more so. And we've got the Republican convention coming up the first week in September, the Democratic convention the first week, the last week in August. And as you're watching it in the Chicago metro suburbs, we're taping this on the 17th, but you may be watching it either in the week of the Democratic or Republican convention. Much more interesting. Enough of that. Look, I'll tell you more about Bill Brady. All you really need to know, he's been in the legislature, I'd say now for, what is it, 12, 14 years?
Approximately.
Something like that. First in the State House, then in the State Senate. He ran for governor in the Republican primary in 2006, laid the groundwork, some would say, for a run in 2010. Looks like he's running. And so, Bill Brady, why don't we just start out with that? You running for governor in 2010?
Well, you're right about laying the groundwork. I've had the opportunity to be invited into this counties around the state and townships around the state. In the last 20 months, I've probably been in over 100 of those organizations, and finding out what people are looking for and how we can take the Republican Party back to the people of Illinois.
Take them back, because you realize, I mean, that's one of the captions for the show, or one of the topics. Is the Republican Party going to be the comeback kid? It'd be a major league comeback for the Republicans to come back. Have you folks given up on 28?
Not at all. 28 is a pivotal portion or a part of our bringing the Republican Party back to the people of Illinois and building for success in 2010.
But in November of 2008, which is coming up in what, 80 days is the election, right? The Republicans are down in terms of the state Senate, 37 to 22. Right. Let's focus on the state Senate. How many seats do you pick up?
Well, we'd like to think we could pick up one or two. Let's face it, the Democrats drew this map. If we were still under the previously drawn map, we would still have Senate Republican.
Excuse me, but they are fighting like mad dogs. They are trying to divide up the spoils.
Like mad
Look, Berkowitz can't get along with Speaker Mike Madigan. They hate each other, right?
Hate's a strong word, but it's
awful
word, close to defining their relationship.
Emil Jones goes along with Berkowitz. He don't get along so well with Speaker Mike either, right?
I'd say that's a fair assessment.
Okay, so those three folks, the titular heads of the Democratic Party, right, you know, don't seem to be doing so well. Hines is not exactly in love with any of those guys, and he's likely candidate to run for governor. Reverend Meeks is not in love with Berkowitz. Basically said he lied, he cheated, he didn't keep his end of the agreement. He'll probably run for governor. Lisa Madigan, the daughter of Speaker Mike, she seems to be gearing up for a run for governor. She's the Attorney General. Pat Quinn, he never talks with the governor. He's the lieutenant governor. Come on, that Democratic, you'd have to say the Democratic Party that I've just painted is just a joke, right?
I think that dysfunction.
You guys should be able to wipe them off the face of the,
well,
to quote the guy from Iran, I mean, wipe them off the face of the earth, right?
I think in 2010 you're going to find the victory in those spoils. But I think...
Why can't you do it in 2008?
Well, I think we are doing things in 2008. We're winning county board races. We're going to pick up some, hopefully a House seat down south. We're going to pick up hopefully a couple Senate seats. We're going to hold what we've got.
So this mess, and all you can hope for is one House seat and two Senate seats?
Jeff, look at the demographics of the districts as they were drawn. And when you look at the fact that this is the most gerrymandered map that we've ever been under, that they've fingered out every way they could to give Democratic majorities, those are the truths of this situation. So our goal has got to be to build a stronger party. 2010, take back the statewide office, particularly the office of governor, and then use that leverage to make sure we get a fairer map, and then rebuild through the legislative races. And in the meantime, put the right policies forward to the people of Illinois.
So what are the 2 or 3 main things you're throwing out there as the message you think of the Republican Party across the state of Illinois in 2008?
Balance our budget, reduce the tax burden. We're fighting the Democrats every day, and we're taking every advantage we have to keep them from overtaxing and overtaxing and overtaxing the people of Illinois. It's not an easy battle because they control the legislature, they control the governor's office, but we were able to use what skills we had to keep them from passing a gross receipts tax. I mean, if you believe that Mike Madigan felt that the gross receipts tax was something he was philosophically opposed to, think again. He helped us defeat the gross receipts tax because we were able to pit him against Rod Berkowitz, and we were able to use that successfully and strategically to save the people of Illinois from what would have been a horrendous nail in the economic coffin.
You think people of Illinois will buy that in 2008 and 2010, that you, the Republicans, saved them from getting a tax increase?
Oh, I think they know it's true. 2008 is going to be a difficult race for us. Barack Obama, this phenomenon that we frankly don't understand.
He seems to be a phenom who's going down at the moment, right?
You're right. You know, some of our polling data shows that in races that we were very concerned about, congressional, Senate, and House races, that Senator Obama's popularity isn't all that great.
In the state of Illinois, let alone in the country.
You get in the southern part of the state, and John McCain's popularity is much greater.
What about in the northern part of the state?
We get in the northern part of the state, Barack Obama's popularity is good, but it's only, in some cases, as few as 3 points ahead.
So are you in trouble in that,
of John McCain.
In that 11th district? Jerry Weller's there, it's an open seat. He's not running again?
No. We've got a superior candidate. Marty Ozinga is a businessman.
He's taking on Debbie Halverson?
Taking on Debbie Halverson, who's given a great deal back to his community. He understands what the people need in Washington, D.C. The people understand that what they need in Washington, D.C., and they also understand that Marty Ozinga is not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi when it comes to Speaker of the House.
Although he did support a few Democrats in terms of funding and otherwise in Chicago and Cook County over the years, didn't he?
I'm not aware of that, but Marty's a strong candidate who has supported Republican candidates and has supported Republicans with his own checkbook.
And in the 8th Congressional District, do you think that the Republicans can take that away from Melissa Bean with Steve Greenberg?
I do. We've got a good candidate in Steve Greenberg.
But it's money, 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 and so far he hasn't shown him the money. She's got about $2 million in cash in hand, and he's got about, what, 200 maybe?
Well, but he's raising more money, and he's out there doing the things that need to be done. I was with Steve again yesterday, and as I travel this state, I see Steve out there. No one's going to outwork Steve
Where were
Greenberg.
you, in the 8th Congressional District?
I was in Palatine yesterday, and we were working with a group, and he was telling me about his day and all the events that he had. So he's getting his message out there. Money's going to be helpful, and I would encourage anyone who can to send him money.
So you think he's got a shot at taking that seat back with the Republicans?
I do.
They held it for 35 years or longer, 35 years just with Phil Crane. Melissa Bean's had it for 4 years. She doesn't seem, you know, offshore drilling, something. I know that's not coming up on the state level, but just so you're out there campaigning.
Absolutely.
That's an issue he's making something of. He's for that. She's claiming she's for it. He says not so much.
Well, with the gas prices the way they are, everyone's concerned about it.
Offshore drilling.
Yeah, and we're not just talking about short-term. This is a long-term solution as well. And Steve's right on that message. And if he's pushed Melissa to take a softer approach, the right approach, good for him.
All right, so back to the state stuff, back to your run for governor.
Sure.
Last time around, you split the conservative vote, as most would say, with Jim Oberweis. He got the majority of it. You got what was left. Ron Gidwitz was in there running as a moderate. Steve Rauschenberger started running as a conservative, and then he teamed up as lieutenant governor. Right. Dan Rutherford ran for Secretary of State. People say he may be looking at run for governor this time. Joe Burkett, who close run against Lisa Madigan, almost beat her for Attorney General in 2002, say he may be back to run for governor after being Judy Bartopinka's running mate. That's an interesting ticket. Have I left anybody out that you're running against?
You know, I'm running to bring the Republican Party back to the people of Illinois. And if in January of the next year I decide that my candidacy for governor is the best way to do that, you'll be one of the first to know. We certainly.
So you're not declaring yet, but it does sound like
it's too early. You know, I am focused on using the 2008 elections to build a stronger party through the candidates that we have, to find the differences.
But you didn't raise much money, and you know, Rich Miller in Capital Facts pointed that out and said, you know, may show that you know that you don't have the support that's there. He didn't like your excuse that you didn't want to drain money from 28 candidates.
He can like or dislike it. The truth of the matter is, we didn't ask people for money. Last year, I raised nearly $200,000, the highest, third highest in my caucus.
Last year, you raised how much?
Nearly $200,000, the third highest in my caucus. The year in the primary, I was able to raise over $700,000 in a very split, divided primary, and we were able to get a lot of support.
But for running for governor, how much are you going to need to raise? We'll get to how much you put in yourself.
15 to 30 million.
Seriously, 15 to 30 million for run for governor.
30 million.
So that's like you've never raised anything like it. You've been talking 700,000.
Either of any other people you've talked to, but
can anybody break out?
What we've did in the last few years is taken the time to go around and meet the people who have an interest.
How much could you put in yourself? You're supposed to be a wealthy guy.
You know, I don't intend to self-finance this campaign. I intend.
But could you? Just capacity. Do you have the net worth?
I don't have $30 million.
What's your net worth?
It's
inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah,
what is it?
It's not as much as it was 4 years ago with the housing market.
We're talking $2 million or something.
It's greater than that.
$4 million.
It's greater than that.
$6 million.
Let's just leave it greater than 4.
Okay, somewhere to 4 to 5.
Yeah.
So by my standards, you can only put in $1 million.
Your point is that it takes money to win these races, and it does. And I would tell you, in addition to a vast majority of the county chairmen who've offered their support, my Senate colleagues, a number of very willing financial investors have said, we're ready to step up and make sure that this state is returned to balance, is returned to Republican Party's principles, is returned to a pro-business environment so that we can begin working our way out of this financial catastrophe.
Well, where do you stand on the capital plan? The governor has proposed first a $25 billion capital plan, then a $34 billion, now back to $25 billion. Before he was going to have expanded gaming finance that. Now it sounds like the lease of the lottery. What's your position?
We need a capital plan, but let me tell you this.
What size? Should it be 10 billion, 15,
let me say
20?
This. I don't trust this governor, nor the Democratic leadership, to give them a $35 or a $25 billion capital plan.
So how much do you trust them for?
I think what we ought to be looking at, and I frankly think this is practical if we're going to pass something between $3 and $4.5 billion on an annual basis. And to steal a term from Ronald Reagan when he dealt with the Russians, and oftentimes that's the way we feel when we're dealing with Governor Berkowitz, trust but verify.
So you dole it out annually. That's part of the trust.
So we put about
$4 billion a year.
$4 billion. Let's take a figure. It helps us maximize retrieving the federal dollars that we've sent there.
Is that enough to get the matching federal returns?
There's approximately $9 billion out there.
And how much do you have to put up to get it?
That remains a question, in all honesty. Well, traditionally it'd be $2 billion, but we're not sure that that's the answer. It may be more than that.
How much more?
It could be as much as $9 billion to get the $9 billion the way they've positioned it.
Right.
Now let's look at that.
So that leaves you short if you only put 4 in a year, because this year ain't going to cut it.
Depends on how many years you're going to carry this over. If the governor proves trustworthy in the first year of a $4 billion capital plan, then maybe we could be looking at a 6th the next year. And if he proves trustworthy,
but does that money wait for you, or does that, if you only put up 4 this year, does the rest wait or not?
That's a good question, but the fact of the matter remains, we need to start passing a capital program now, or we're not going to get any of that money.
Okay, so 4 a year, but what total, looking forward, what do you look at as the total package for the capital plan you would pass?
Oh, well, Illinois needs to be investing $4 to $5 billion a year.
Every year?
Every year in capital for at least the next 4 or 7 years.
So somewhere it sounds like 16 to 28 billion.
If we can then have our infrastructure in a position where we're repairing and maintaining, we'll be in a lot better position.
So how would you propose financing that $4 billion a year for the next 2 years?
Well, let's look at the past 6 years.
What do you need? Does that mean like 800 million to $1 billion you need to finance it?
Oh, maybe even more than that. But let's look at the past 6 years. Government revenues have grown over $7 billion. And what
how many years? 6 years?
Over the last 6 years, where
so that's about
Governor Berkowitz and Mike
about $700 million a year.
No,
average.
It's about $1 billion a year.
Billion a year. Average.
Billion a year.
But things are down. This year they're hoping for $500 million.
Right.
It's a down economy.
And unless we change the leadership in the state, things are going to continue to go down. It's not just the nation's economy; it's Illinois' economy.
But it's both.
It is.
Unemployment's pushing, what, 7%
in
Illinois. It's 5.5% nationally.
Because the leadership in Illinois.
It's because it's such a good state. Because Mayor Daley will tell you, look around Chicago, there are cranes all over. What the hell does he care about unemployment? I mean, look, Mayor, I would invite the mayor to come on and talk about that, because tell us how it's such a great state and great city for unemployment. That's what he says. He measures things by how many cranes he sees when he walks out the door.
Forbes magazine ranks us amongst the worst states in the nation when it comes to looking at where a business ought to make an investment. I estimate that the lackluster performance that we've had, being the 5th largest state in the nation, but growing amongst the 5 worst states in the nation, it's cost us over 700,000 jobs.
So what are the 3 most important things to change the business climate if you were governor, and if you could control or impact the legislature?
Well, reduce the cost of doing business by rolling back the fees and the taxes on businesses.
That's item 1, rolling back fees and taxes on business.
2 is reform the workers' compensation system so they can have a competitive format in which to operate, not leaving our workers on the streets who are injured, but reform it so that it's as competitive as any state in the nation.
That's number 2. Number 3?
And then I think medical malpractice reform may be.
But the law's been passed. It's in the courts now, right?
Right. But it hasn't parlayed out. We still have doctors exiting the state.
Is that right?
We still have some of the highest health care costs.
Because they think the courts are going to go the other way?
I think there's no question in their mind.
So you need
Look
a
what
governor.
this court do last time.
But you need
the
somebody.
Same thing.
Well, so the only
Same
way you change
control
that
of
is
the
to
court.
elect different justices.
Absolutely.
Those state justices are elected, state Supreme Court justices.
Right.
And you would spearhead that as a governor to try to lead that charge. What is it,
Absolutely.
something like 4-3 Democrat over Republican now, right?
Right. In fact, we need to relook at the way in which we district the Supreme Court. We haven't redistricted the Supreme Court districts in 20 or 30 years, and we need to look at that.
All right, so what we're hearing is that Speaker Mike thinks he can pick up 4 or 5 House seats, despite what you were saying about the Republicans picking up 1.
Well, I said, we'll pick up 1 for sure. I will bet you.
Is it a net gain of 1, or is just a pickup?
You know, everything's
at the end of the day,
right I hope so.
What do you predict? At the end of the day, is there a
Too
net gain?
early to predict. You know, the Obama phenomenon, the problems that the Democratic Party has, there's no question that we should be able to leverage in these seats to retain seats this Democratic dysfunction. Picking up seats is a little more problematic because those are the strongest seats that they drew by map.
Speaker Mike is said to be plotting to pick up 5 House seats. If he does that, he has a veto-proof majority.
Right.
Then he passes a tax increase. He hasn't said that, but people think he's implied that. Is that right? Has Speaker Mike Madigan implied he'd like to see an income tax increase?
Oh, there's no question that when I sat in the leadership meetings last year, Mike Madigan said he'd be happy to pass a tax increase, except for the governor was going to veto it.
So if he gets the 5 seats, he can override that veto in the House. Presumably they could do so if Emil Jones wanted to in the Senate. Then you get a 2009 income tax increase.
That's why it's so important to support the Republican candidates running for office.
You oppose an income tax increase?
Absolutely.
You oppose a tax swap?
I don't necessarily oppose a tax swap.
Which was neutral. The proposed tax swap would lower property taxes but raise income taxes by so much more. It would be a net gain of $5 to $6 billion.
Illinois can't afford that.
You don't support that.
We're one of the highest taxing states in the nation.
Do you support
We need to reduce property taxes. You know, I'll do that as governor out of natural revenue growth, or I'll do it by moving within.
But no net increase in tax take for the state of Illinois. Is that what you're saying?
That in terms of rates.
What about revenue? Revenue you might like to see go up if the economy does better in Illinois.
Not might like to. We've got to see it.
Okay.
We put 700,000 people back to work. We'll have over $3 billion in new revenue without raising 1 tax rate.
So you're a supply sider.
No question. It works.
No, what you're saying is
this sure as heck doesn't
you wouldn't
work.
buy into increasing the income tax rate from 3% to 5%.
No.
No special tax on people earning more than $200,000.
No. We've got a constitution that prohibits that. It should
no
stay that way.
GRT, no big increase in the sales tax.
No.
Get the economy going, revenue flows in. That's how you get more revenue. That's Bill Brady's plan.
That's how my business works too.
Senator John Cullerton disagrees with you on that. You know that. Have you talked with Johnny?
Well, John agrees with everything that's happened over the last 6 years, which has put Illinois in the biggest debtor state position in the nation, which has given us, he lives and resides in the county that has the highest taxes of any county in the nation. We have the biggest budget deficits. Clearly, he doesn't have to look far to see that the past policies that he's agreed with have failed. Now, I happen to like Senator Cullerton, and a lot of issues
guys
he's
are
good.
buddies? You play poker too, like you did with Obama?
But when it comes to economic policy, John ought to leave that to others and focus on maybe some of the areas where his legal background can give him more experience.
You like John Cullerton?
No, there's no question.
He
He's
likes
a nice
you.
guy.
You guys get along.
Absolutely.
You differ a lot on policies, on public policy.
Absolutely.
But you're cordial.
Oh,
You're
I
agreeable.
consider him a friend, and we've worked on issues
Do you
together.
play poker? Does he play poker too?
I have played poker before. I don't know about
With
John.
John? You don't know.
No.
But you did used to say, you said you played with Barack Obama, right?
He said it, and I agreed.
Okay, we've talked about Barack before, but you overlapped a bit. At least you were in the State House when he was in the State Senate, and then when you came back to the Senate, he was there for the last 2 years, right?
Right.
So you overlapped in the House and the Senate a bit. You know the guy. You have played poker with him, right?
We've enjoyed entertainment and game of chance.
Right. And you've observed him running now for over a year.
Yes.
What's your take on this guy? I mean, I know as a Republican you don't support him, but when you get to the man, what's your take, having known him personally and observed him? What's the core of Barack Obama?
The core is that when he is on speech, when he's given a speech where he's got it in front of him, he's charming, he's very good. And he maximizes that to the fullest extent, and maybe a better extent than I've ever seen anybody. But like last night, when he gets off script.
Last night, we say we're taping this on August 17th. If you're watching it a little later, it'll be a week or two ago. You're referring to the discussion at the Saddleback Church, right?
We're both Barack
With
Obama.
Rick Warren, Pastor Rick Warren.
Pastor Warren. We're both Barack Obama and John McCain were asked the same questions.
They took turns.
Yeah.
One
And
for
there's no
Barack Obama for the first hour, McCain for the second.
And it was an unscripted event. And there's no question that Barack stumbled on several of those questions, and there's no question that John McCain spoke from the heart with an immediate response to those questions.
Well, one of them was, well, how important, as you think about it, we haven't talked about the social issues. We'll start with that now. In the country, looking out there, is the economy stupid? It's about gas prices and offshore drilling, or is it something to do with social values, abortion, gays, guns, God, abortion, and so forth?
I think first of all, it's about bringing our troops home safely, and making sure that we do that in a way that does the best we can to preserve world peace. And that's what they're looking for. John McCain clearly has the experience. When asked who is one of the people you'll look to for advice more than right out of the bat, Barack Obama talked about his wife and his grandmother. John McCain said Petraeus. John McCain knows that there are people who can help you personally, but there are other people that you need to rely on when it comes to solving the problems that you're challenged with as President of the United States.
And interestingly enough, the second person he said was Congressman John Lewis, and referred back to the days when he got his skull fractured when he was engaged in civil rights protests. So is that the breadth of John McCain? Going from David Petraeus to Congressman John Lewis, from somebody who's perhaps an Iraq war hero to somebody who's a democratic civil rights hero?
Well, I think there's no question that the breadth of John McCain and the experience that John McCain brings that Barack Obama, frankly, couldn't have had because of his age and because of his
So age
politics.
turns out to be a plus at this point for John McCain. People thought he would be low energy. People don't want to go with a guy who's going to be over 70.
I think everyone knows he's not low energy.
But he's going to be over 70. Should a
Should
guy be president of the United States over 70? I mean,
Absolutely.
you're a pretty young man, but you're not 70.
Absolutely.
At 70, you think you'd be ready to be president? I mean, do you have the energy to do that?
There's no question in my mind that John McCain has the energy, and there's no question in my mind that he has the experience. You compare that to Barack Obama, who has 6 years in the Illinois General Assembly and less than 3 years in the United States Senate, and a record of achievement that, frankly, if you look at it, mostly piggybacks on what other people accomplished.
Although he would say not. I mean, and Barack's been a guest of public affairs. He's a friend. He's been here a number of times.
I consider him a friend as
Bill
well.
Brady's a friend of public affairs because you're here.
We're talking about the presidency of the United States.
But he does look thin. You're right. There was one question that Pastor Warren asked him about his 10 years ago. Was there something that he would have thought about differently 10 years ago? And McCain went quickly to offshore drilling because 10 years ago, McCain had been a congressman for 16 years. Not a congressman. He had been in the Congress for 16 years, first as a congressman and as a senator. And before that, he'd been in the military for, like a quarter of a century. Barack Obama 10 years ago was in his third or second year of the state Senate. So he could talk about his views about welfare being a little different than they were then. And I think that really highlighted the difference of an experience.
There's no question.
And I guess, Paul Green said in the Democratic primary, Paul Green's a Roosevelt University professor, man about town, political pundit. He said experience didn't matter in that primary. It was all about change. Has that now changed in the general election?
I hope so.
It's about experience, no longer just about change.
There is a phenomenon surrounding Barack Obama that I don't understand. Because when I look at the two candidates, when I make my decisions,
he's a charming guy. He's a very charming guy.
I look at the substance, And whether or not we can move the American public from the charm of Barack Obama to the substance of what we look for in a United States president will be what determines the outcome of that election.
What is it about Bill Brady? Is it substance or charm?
I'd say it's substance. There's
substance.
a lot of people that say
no
I'm not a
charm.
very charming fellow.
You're not going to win the Miss Congeniality contest in the state Senate?
No.
That's what McCain's line is. He never wins the Miss Congeniality
What I'm interested
contest.
in doing is bringing jobs back to Illinois, balancing our budget.
Jobs, but there's a big deal about education going on in the state legislature now. And as you know, Reverend Meeks has said, the funding is broken. It's done the wrong way. Low-income people get the short end of the stick on education because the funding comes from the property tax, and low-income people don't own much property. He wants to change that, and if it's not, and one thing, if things don't start changing soon, he's going to run for governor. What is the Republican response to Reverend Meeks on the issue of education?
Well, first of all, we believe that
what's your response, Bill Brady? Have you ever talked with Senator Meeks about this?
I have.
And what do you say when he says we should have a tax swap, we should raise taxes substantially and send more money into the inner city schools? What do you say to Reverend Meeks?
I tell him that the people he represents can't afford for the government to reach in and take more money out of their paycheck away from their family so that we can have big government. I tell him to look at the facts. Illinois is one of the highest spending states overall in education. The real problem is we aren't delivering what we ought to do at the school level. We are not also funding it at the right level. We're far too reliant on property taxes. We're the worst state in the nation.
So you agree with Meeks on that one?
No question.
You would make it less reliant on property taxes and more reliant on the income tax?
Absolutely. And in fact, in my last...
But no net increase in tax revenue.
Part of my last agenda was I said 10% of natural revenue growth would be shipped back to the county treasurers to reduce the school portion of the property tax. And every year that would grow by an additional 10% to provide meaningful property tax relief for the people back at home.
But are you talking more money for education for the low-income areas for Reverend Meeks?
If you look at Reverend Meeks' area and you look at the amount of money that's spent in aggregate, in particularly his school district and some of the inner city Chicago districts, it doesn't look like it's a matter of money. They're receiving above many of the districts in my area in terms of overall financing, if not all of them. This is an issue. This is an issue of results.
Let me interrupt to say we're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest, State Senator Bill Brady, Republican from Bloomington, likely candidate in the Republican primary for governor in 2010. At least I think that's safe to say, likely candidate, right?
It's very safe to say.
Let's continue going because this is people know we could give more about your background and what you were and where you went to school, but they can find that all on your website, citizensforbillbrady.com, right?
Thank you, yes.
www.citizensforbillbrady.com. But what they want to know on the issue, and some of the Republicans would like to know, where would you stand on school vouchers and school choice? Because if you went to Meeks and said, look, you need competition, you need choice, we Republicans will do that. In the city of Chicago, $14,000 plus is being spent per kid per year on your constituents. Would you like to take that $14,000 and go to the private school of your choice? Would you make that offer to your buddy, Reverend Meeks?
You make a great argument. And let me just say this.
Do you say yes or no to that? You only got 10 seconds. Yes or no?
When I first entered Chicago, I voted for vouchers in Chicago schools.
Could you offer that to Meeks right now? Because
if we don't do something to...
Tom Cross says you guys got an agenda, but it's nothing. There's nothing there.
If we don't do something
to
curb
idea.
the graduation rate problem and the meets and measures problem...